I'm Joe. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. Hey, Joe. First and foremost, I'm only here by the grace of God and the gift that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me, which is another chance. I've had many of them in my lifetime. It's not my second or third or fourth. It's probably my 100th, 200th, who knows. Thank you, Will, for introducing me. By the power of this program, I'm able to be there for people today. I like to start with that always. And thank you guys for being here, because without you guys, AA ceased to exist. It's a program of people. The first step starts with we, not me. It took me a long time to understand that. So I'll tell you what it was like, and what happened when I got here and what it's like now. Experience, Strength, and Hope, they call it in this book. I am going to read directly out of this book and just kind of give some of my identifications with it. I am never here to tell anybody what you should do. I'll just tell you what I have done. I'm only here to correlate in the 12th step, where it says try to carry this message. I just try to carry my experience attached to that message. I try to stay as true to AA as possible. I have a sober date. It's June 16, 2018. Sobered is 6 years. By the grace of God, I only have today. The numbers don't really matter to me. I know early on it really mattered to me, because I couldn't stay sober anything like a day or two or a week without being incarcerated or in an institution or circumstantially. Usually sleeping for 35 hours because I stayed up for 5 days. That's when I stayed sober, ish. There is a disclaimer in this book, and I always love to read it because there is 42 personal stories after the 164 pages that is actually the step work in this book. It's because, I stay true to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I try to use the word alcohol repeatedly. One is too many, 1,000 is enough. Alcohol was a problem in my life. Drugs were a part of my life. I will minimize it as best as possible. But when I have a full hour or 45 minutes, I'd be robbing my story of my truth. And I was told to tell my truth when I come up here, but not also to respect the guidelines of AA. So I'll do my best to hold that true. On page 29, it says, further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in his personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he establishes a relationship with God. He's given a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Which means, like I said, if you don't identify with it, try to identify with the feelings and emotions that were attached to the story. My story gets dark and deep, and I'll war story for a few minutes to qualify myself, but I'll really try to get more into this book, the solution, and what happened when I got here. Spoiler alert, I'm going to mention God a lot. This is a God program. So I grew up on Long Island, obviously, not from down here. Typical childhood of the 90s, late 80s, and even early 2000s. Product of divorced family, very common. It's like a 50% odds these days, people getting divorced. But my parents had a decent enough relationship. My father came by twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, hung out by the pool. My parents seemed to get along enough, right? So they gave me a good example with structure in that sense. But my mother raised 4 kids. She had 3 children before me. My father ended up raising my brother and 2 sisters. They're 7, 8, 9 years older than me. They were my idols. They were my heroes, my older brother especially. He'll be part of my story because I followed in his footsteps. My 2 sisters are not us. They can drink and put it down. They partied when they were younger and never looked back. I don't know why I have this disease, and that really has no relevance whatsoever. It took me a long time to understand that too. So with that being said, my mother's side of the family was the disciplinaries. My grandparents were in Florida, but they were up regularly to help my mom out. My uncle lived around the block. They were blue collar, worked hard. Didn't play hard. They kind of saved their money like normal people do and tried to pay their bills and stuff like that. And then there was my father's side, which were the enablers. And everybody loves an enabler. At least I do. Keep it on me. So basically my grandparents were, wealthy enough where I got a lot of stuff that I probably didn't deserve. I really wasn't a good kid. I was a real pain in the ass. I like to talk back. I like to get in trouble. I like to have those isms before I even picked up any substance in my life. And I leaned on them. You know, that's a huge part of my story because they would always bail me out. They'd always tell me it was going to be all right. They'd always buy me that new shiny thing to make me feel whole, feel better. But as soon as I got those things, even at a young age, it was like, what's next? You know, I didn't realize I had a God-sized hole that they talk about in this program, that I could throw anything at it, didn't matter. It was just never going to be filled. This complete distance from reality as a young kid. Mental health is a part of my family history, including my history. I was just a little kid who just felt like he didn't belong, felt depressed and angry and despairing and anxious, confused, and really frustrated. Frustrated was probably, I've come to learn years later that frustration was really like one of my biggest things early on, which led to anger, which is my number one character defect to this day. So 5 to like 10, you know, real quick, just kept getting in trouble at school, would hang out with all the older kids. Around 9, 10 years old is when I picked up my first substance. It was in a bag, and it was smokable. And I watched my brother and my cousin do it, so I wanted to do it. You know, a year later, I was hanging out in a sump. A sump is where all the water collects from the sewer systems, if you don't know what it is. You know, some people talk about the park, some people talk about the city, some people talk about the woods, some people talk about their backyards. Mine was this sump. It was the highlight of my childhood. I'm not even kidding. We hung out there every night, bonfires and bike jumps and all over quads. And we were always there. And I remember we went to the gas station and we bought 3 40s of OE English. Malt liquor, baby. And I, you know, I probably sipped on wines and drinks at my family stuff. You know, sangria might have been there, or Zambuca. You know, come from an Italian household. There's always Zambuca around somewhere. But I don't really remember it. You know, it wasn't really relevant in my story. But me getting in trouble in all these situations really started when I picked up those substances. You know, because I liked the stuff that came in the bag, and you smoked a lot better than the stuff that you put down the gullet. I didn't want to drink it. It tasted like crap. But for both experiences were identical. The second I picked that stuff up, I felt different. The voices quieted down a little bit. I felt like I was part of. The back of the book talks about like conviviality and companionship and colorful imagination. This is what this stuff gave me. I didn't realize that substances early on were already replacing a spiritual experience. They were already replacing God. They were already replacing the people around me. I needed these things very early to feel part of and comfortable in my own skin. And, you know, it took off real quick. That story and that sump is my friends drank about this much of their bottle, and I drank all of mine, all of theirs, got sick, and ended up in the bushes. You guys over there. It's an obnoxious joke, but it lives on. You know, and I ran with that. You know, and most of the kids I hung out with, like I said, I had older siblings, so I was the cool little brother that was willing to do stupid stuff. I would steal the stuff from the supermarkets. I would light the mailboxes on fire. I would kick over this garbage cans. I was just doing this stupid stuff that made me feel a part of. My first addiction was negative attention. Because my mom worked full-time, went to school. I saw my dad 2 days a week. I got whatever I wanted when I seen him. But when he wasn't there, I felt like I wasn't seen, really. Felt like my mom wasn't always around. She did the best. She had dinner on the table. Excuse me. You know, she did what she can do, but I was bitter about it. Like, bitter about the divorce, bitter about, you know, situation. And at 10 years old, those substances took off real quick, and I got kicked out of school. Moved in with my father. This is going to be great. Free for all. Which it kind of was, to be honest with you. It was my stepmom and my dad. I lived about 5 towns over now. But I really was so angry. This is when like anger kind of took over my life. Like so angry that my parents would remove me from my friends. The things I knew, where I liked to ride my bike. All the things that I knew that felt familiar to me. It was displacement. It was uncomfortability, and it was change. Come to find, I'm not real fond of change. And at an early age, it really affected me. I acted out, and it just kept getting worse. By 13, I picked up harder substances. Minimalize that as well, hallucinogenics and white powder. That goes in a little bag too. Any 13-year-old, even whether you're drinking or drugging, is not mentally equipped to deal with this stuff. And it quickly took me into its world. It took me into the different people. The people that I thought I liked, the people I looked up to, the drug dealers, the guys with the fancy stuff, the cute girls. My brother was in the thralls of what he was going through, but he was my big brother. I followed in his footsteps. If my brother's doing it, I'm going to do it. You know, and that's how I lived my life. 13 to 16, I got kicked out of another 2 schools. 16 is a really big one. It's an identification point of real true selfishness and self-centeredness. My grandparents were old school handshake Italians. Money in the top drawer type people. Everything was done with a handshake in my family. And there was an exuberant amount of money in that top drawer that I thought it was going to be okay to take some of it and go sell these things that I want to sell to feel like I'm part of and make this money that I saw all these other people making. And instead of putting that money back, I spent it on substances. Around this time, I discovered vodka. I loved vodka. Finally found my booze of choice, and that took off too. I was drinking daily. I was doing that other stuff daily. And that money kept disappearing from that drawer. At the end of that money run, it was about $30,000 that I took in about 6 weeks. Thought that I was going to put it back. Had all the right intentions. Nobody will ever know. It was like that warped thinking that this book talks about. I had a broken brain from a real early age, and I already started putting this crap in my body that was altering my perception and allowing me to feel this comfort, this spiritual experience. Alcohol and drugs gave me that peace, ease, and comfort that I seeked. It gave me serenity. It gave me purpose. It gave me direction. It gave me influence. Long story short, my grandmother never spoke to me ever again. The silver spoon was removed from my mouth, pretty much. My grandfather, who was a very religious man, forgave me almost immediately, but the money train was over. The enabling was kind of over in that sense. I lived with my mother for a little bit, pinged back and forth from parent to parent for a while. My father finally forgave me, took me back in around 18, 19. Wasn't getting along with my mother. My alcohol and drug addiction took me to places I never thought I was going to see, because that 16-year-old kid that I was just talking about took that money, was charged as an adult as a grand larceny felon. And they put me in prison, jail at that time, high security jail on Long Island. They put me on the 4th floor, which was the upstate ward, which was the people that were really doing hard time. They thought they were going to scare me straight. And even though I didn't eat much of the food while I was there, because they said, "You're going home, buddy. This is our food," and scared out of my wits, I took that as like a badge of honor. The second I walked out of there and I made it through that, I ran with that. This was the life I was going to live. I just wasn't going to get caught, right? I'm never going to get caught. You always think you're never going to get caught. And the good alcoholic that I was, I kept getting caught. By the time I was 20 years old, 21, I was arrested 68 times, 144 court appearances, some minor, some major, some felonies, some BS. It just kept getting worse. Through that time, it goes from jail to prison, which happened to me as well. It just kept getting worse. Through that time, psych wards were part of my history. Suicide attempts, loneliness, despair, angst. I just could not feel anything. And I kept submerging myself with this stuff to make myself feel better constantly and daily. But it was never the drugs or alcohol. It was always the circumstance. It was always the people. My dad never left. If I had that car in the driveway, if I had the friends, that I wouldn't be this person. And that's so not true. For the next handful of years, I decided I didn't want to get arrested, and I decided that I'm going to sell the stuff that I like to do on the streets to the people I care about with a conscience. I was a drug dealer with a conscience is what I called myself. You called me 2 times, right? That's cool. You called me the 3rd time, you got a problem, buddy. I swear, I literally lived the broken brain. This is how I thought about life. This is how I processed everything, The guys who were getting DWIs, but I wasn't, What's wrong with you? Why can't you drive drunk in a straight line, Very judgmental. That's where I live. I took a hostage. I had somebody in my life for about 13 years. I destroyed her life along the way. Made her neurotic. This is a family and friends disease, I come to learn. That everybody I touched along this journey and path of my life, I was just destroying along the way. I always would say the line famously that a lot of people say, it's not unique, is, "It's my life. What does it matter?" Stay in your lane, Don't worry about me. I have this. I got this. Trying to validate that I got this and I could do it on my own for countless amount of years. Unfortunately, due to the circumstances of selling these things that I like to do myself, I was really successful financially. This was the answer. Self-knowledge, it talks about in here. I have arrived. That was my arrival. Money became another addiction to me. And along with money comes more problems, as they say. It was another form of manipulation, tactic, and technique. I was going to control people around me. I had what you needed, so you really needed me. And when I had control of these things, I would wield that power uncontrollably. Ego and pride, Self-will run riot, as they say. I didn't know any of these things at the time, but I was suffering from true alcoholism. I was suffering from the disease of more. It didn't matter what I put in there or what I got or what I had. It was never enough. I just needed more. 31, fast forward after ruining my life, burning people down, family not really in my life. 22, my father stopped talking to me. My brother was in his active addiction. He was the only person that would take me in. He suffered from another substance abuse where it turns into intravenous drug use. My journey went down that way too. Classically, to keep it appropriate for AA, I said it went from my hand to my nose to my arm. It just kept progressing like anything else in my life. When I drank 30 drinks. When I picked up, when I said I was only going to do one, it was 4 days later. That girl that I took hostage was 7 months pregnant, and I would disappear for 3-4 days at a clip. I'd go to the bar or the strip club or where I like to go to hang out with the people that are doing the same thing I like to do. Doctor's opinion really says it the best. It says, the alcoholic life seems the only normal one. It's hard to differentiate the true from the false. I hung out with people who were getting arrested and doing the shit I like to do, and were doing all the things that, and I always would say, I'm not that guy yet, right? Yet. But I always became the yet every single time. I'm only going to drink it, right? And then I'm only going to do it this way. I'm only going to do it that way. It was just manipulation. The big book talks about it too, about I'm only going to drink whiskey. I'm only going to drink beer. I'm going to swear off with a solemn oath without a solemn. I'm going to go on a trip. I'm going to read wordy books. I'm going to do all these things to try to control my drinking. But whenever I did control my drinking, it was real shitty and miserable. It was like, why can't I drink the fifth one? I was like Bill's story. Like, what's the use anyhow? As soon as the whiskey rose to my nose, I said, what's the use anyhow? Every single time. And I remember, I always bring up that story because that story about when I would disappear for 3-4 days at a clip with a 7-month pregnant woman, all I wanted to do was pick that phone up and tell her I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. I just wanted to tell her that I loved her and I cared about her and I didn't know why I was the way I was. And I didn't even have the guts to pick the phone up. I would just watch it ring. I would turn it over. Just because if I couldn't see who it was, I can only assume that it wasn't her. She was probably one of the last people calling me. The friends would call me once in a while. My mom would call me once in a blue moon. And my brother was in the thralls. I was in the thralls. We were kind of written off, the black sheep of the family type of thing. And, towards the end, this is right near the end when I started to come to AA. I remember one of the last times I picked up my brother, who's 6'3", 7 years older than me, 240 pounds, man's man. I'm 150 pounds soaking wet at this point in my life. Was scared of me, literally scared of me. I could look him right in the eyes. He's like, "There's something wrong with you." Very argumentative. I was one for grabbing weapons. I was real physical with people. A lot of my charges in early use was assault, aggravated harassments, criminal mischiefs. It wasn't just stealing shit. It was just anything to feel like I had the power and control. And I remember the cops rolled up on me, and I was doing what I like to do, and they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "You know what I'm doing." And I did what I did right in front of them, and I got out of the car, because if I was going banged up. Right? Sick thinking. And they took me in, and they come to find there's a loophole. I had psych history, and there was a missing persons report on me because nobody knew where I was. And they took me to a psych ward. And just like everything in my life, I talked my way out of it. They let me out the next day. And this is when I kind of knew this book talks about, try to put it down for a day, a week, a month. Try anything like a year. It says most of us will be relapsed, within the week. And I left that hospital, and I went right back to that car and did exactly what I was doing the day before. That I just didn't get arrested for, which is like a miracle in itself. I knew I had a problem, and, I didn't stop. I kept going. December 31st, 2017, I decided that my life wasn't worth living. I was emotionally, financial, mental, and spiritually bankrupt. I did not know there was a spiritual currency thing here, that I was suffering from a spiritual malady. I did not know what this program had to offer. I never went to AA. I went to NA for 5 years, never got a sponsor, never read their texts. I went to a million institutions, never took their suggestions. When you leave this building, have a game plan. I had a game plan. The game plan was to get messed up as soon as I leave this place. And I did that. I go to the back of a church, I steal some of the stuff from my brother, and I go to the liquor store and I buy with what little money I had, which I stole, by the way. I buy a small 750 milliliter bottle of Grey Goose. Because if they're going to find me dead, they're not going to find me with stolen. That's how I thought. I don't want to forget that that's the way I thought about life. Like, if I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to go high-class death, right? They're going to find me with the good stuff. Bizarre. You know, when I go to the back of that church and I curse God out and I say what I have to say, and I fall asleep. And the stuff that I was on, I shouldn't have been able to fall asleep. You know, I didn't pick up those substances that were in the car, but I was on a 3-4 day run, like I said, and some guy wakes me up. The beginning of my AA journey, right here and there. I'm in the back of that church, and, excuse me, I ate a bison burger before I came here. How's it? It was delicious, by the way. You guys have great food. Gets me every time. Guy wakes me up, and I say to him, I said, "Do you believe in God?" As I pick up my head and the drool runs from my face, I can just remember the feeling in the back of that church. And he said, "Not in the sense of this book, but maybe in the sense of out there." And I said, "That's nice. Get the hell out of my way." And he said, and I try not to curse too, but it is real relevant because it really kept me here. He said, "You look like crap, bro." And I said, "That's nice. I told you to get the hell out of my way." He said, "Why don't you sit down and shut the fuck up? You don't know anything." A complete stranger in the middle of the afternoon in the back pew of a church. And all it was a guy cursed in the house of God. And I was like, this guy's cool. I like this guy. I swear, that's what I held on to. That's how broken I was and what I needed to hear in that right moment. God provided a service that I did not know was even available in life. And he just started telling me his story. Working with others, speaks about this. 101, 12-stepping people. Not getting too far into the spiritual part of this thing, but talking about what his experience was like and what he used to be like and what he was like now. Kind of like what we do here when we speak to each other, whether we fellowship out in the parking lot or we stand up at a podium, we get to tell you what it was like out there and how bad it really got. You know, but he also gave me this hope. This hope he talked about, like that he didn't live that way anymore. He wasn't on the news anymore. That he wasn't subject to slavery, to the drink or the drug ever again if he continued to live on these spiritual principles. And spiritual principles sounded all right to me. Didn't say God. Didn't even talk about AA. You know, and it opened me up enough to start telling my story. You know, saying, hey man, this is me. Let me tell you about me. And this book talks about if someone wants to tell their story, you just sit there and listen. And he listened. 3 hours went by with tears and yelling and screaming. And something was happening right there and then. It was a spiritual moment. It was a spiritual awakening. And it's a white light moment that not everybody gets to receive, apparently. You know, this book even talks about in the spiritual experience in the back that not everybody has to have a white light moment. Most of us do the educational variety. It's through a slow process and over time. But he did mention two things at the end of this little talk that we had in the back of this church. Come to find, he said, "You know how I ended up here? My daughter was collecting the charities and saw you and thought you might die. And also thought she might hurt her, young girl. She called me and he left his job at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on New Year's Eve, 4 towns over, to come talk to a guy he never met. To give me a message of hope." And he said in the back of that church, he said, "You never have to feel the way you're feeling right now ever again, brother." And he said, "You never have to do it alone." And that is the message of AA, that this is a we program, you know. You know, and those two things couldn't be more true in my life today and why I continue to go through this process and go through everything that they've told me to do. Because that guy gave me something that I couldn't give myself, and that was experience with God. My whole life, that's what I was seeking and didn't know it. I didn't know that I suffered from spiritual malady, that every time I picked up that drink or drug or did something stupid or self-will run riot, that I was blocking off God in my life completely. That I was just killing God and my spirit inside me every single time I picked that stuff up. You know, and at the end of it, he said, "Welcome to AA. I'm your new sponsor. My name is Mike." He went out to his car and he grabbed this book. He said, "This is going to be your answer." He said, "Everything in here." You know, and I don't commonly share this, but he did share a page in this book that really I can identify with. It was page 52. And he said, just think about this when you go home tonight. He said, we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. that we were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to others. You know, in the next line of the thing says, when we saw others solve their problems by simple reliance upon the Spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. He said, we're going to meet up. We're going to read this book. He went and flushed those things out of my car. He said, give me a call tomorrow. He said, don't go to your friend's house. It's New Year's Eve. I know you're going to go. I went. Like a great alcoholic. I didn't pick up, but that session was real good. But that experience helped carry me through that one night. You know, something that happened to me in the back of that church. I knew something happened to me there. And I did this for a little while. And I wanted to get the girl back who left me and said if I finally got sober, she would come back. And I chased her. And February 14th of 2018, I went past her house and she found a new guy, and that went real bad. I didn't get arrested, but I did some stupid stuff, you know? And I picked back up. First relapse. Little humility dose right there. Like, all right, maybe I don't have this. Maybe that spiritual experience won't keep me sober. He told me this was an action program. That you can have all the experiences and read this text all you want, but if you don't apply this stuff to your life, it's useless. It's just a doormat. It's a cup holder. It means nothing. Second experience. Staying sober, meeting up, reading line by line in the book. You know, we're doing the thing. I'm real bitchy about it. It's 6:15 on Saturday morning. You got to be kidding me. I'm 32 years old. Why am I doing this? All the complaints that come with all the newcomer stuff. Got a union job. Making really good money. Working double shifts that I didn't have to do, but I wanted to do it because I replaced AA with work. I made it my higher power. I was getting what I wanted. Power and control all over again, and way too soon without a spiritual experience or these steps. I went back out. Tail between my legs, 1 or 2 days later, I knew something was going on in this program. I'll tell you the truth, it wasn't God that kept me sober, it was you guys. The people that would go back up and get another chip, or the people that would go back up and get a different chip, or the people that would say, hey man, you can get through this. We're here. We will love you until you can love yourself. There's no judgment here. And the ones that are judging are probably just as sick as you, so don't pass judgment on them either. This is a room full of alcoholics, and we're all on a different journey in a different place, but everybody's train arrives on time. Last but not least, I decided to go back to the pool. I love pool. I still love pool. But I wasn't mentally capable. I did not have a defense against the first drink. And I went and hung out with those people where I like to hang out in the bathroom, the side of the building, or up at that bar. And I didn't drink. But the session was so great the next day I did. And I came back to that sponsor and said, what do I have to do? He said, remember the back of that church? He said, sit down, shut the F up. You don't know anything. And for the first time, I finally got what he meant. That everything that I thought I knew, it talks about old threadbare ideas. I need to throw lifelong conceptions out the window. Like this stuff that was basically, gibberish to me. I don't even want to give it a language because I couldn't even look up what it really meant. I needed to experience some of this stuff on my own. I needed to do what he was doing if I wanted to have what he had. And in the first, forward to the first, it says what this book really is. It says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered. Well, I had to look that word up because there's a big discrepancy about recovering and recovered in this program. It only mentions the word recovering twice in this book, and it's referencing newcomers. It mentions it over 60-something times, recovery and recovered several times, referencing people who've been through the step where recovered means restored to a state of normalcy. It means my brain has never been normal, ever. And once I put this other crap in it makes it even more disorientated, and I've been working on a broken brain at only half capacity at best. That my ideas did not work, as this book told me. That if I wanted to recover from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, well, I thought it was just my body reacted to this stuff. My brain was just broken. It was wired differently. The doctor's opinion calls it an allergy. The phenomenon of craving, once triggered, is uncontrollable. It's a desire that you cannot control if you are the real deal alcoholic. The book describes all this stuff. It talks about the moderate drinker, the hard drinker, but the real deal, like me, and I identify with the real deal. And once I pick up, I can't stop, and once I stop, I can't stay stopped unless I have a spiritual answer. That if I come to a program and they talk about insanity, what's insanity? Well, coming to a 12-step program and not doing the steps. It's a 12-step program. I thought I was going to sit here, and as the famous old timer, osmosis, and I was just going to absorb this stuff in, and my life was going to get great. That wasn't the truth. The truth was that I needed to put one foot in front of the other. That I needed to take direction, have structure and discipline that I did not like, that I still don't like. It says to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. Well, that's italic, by the way. Come to find when they printed this book, another little fun fact from a man that had 38 years who now is 43 years I look up to. He said when they printed this book, it cost twice as much money to print italics. There was no computers that you just tapped it into. Twice as much money. So not only is it an important focal point, but it cost them more money that they didn't have when they made the first 300,000 copies of this book. They had to emphasize this point. Precisely means exactly. Didn't really know what that meant either. It says for them, we hope that these pages will be so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary, which means no relapses. I don't need to go investigate anymore. I don't need to experiment and test and do all this stuff. Later on in this book, it tells you if you don't know if you're one of us, go try some controlled drinking. If you're a drug addict, go try some controlled drugging. I have never done one. It's just not my story. Some people can, that's just not my story. I drank for oblivion. I drank to numb the pain and find a way out and get away from it and skirt around life as best as humanly possible. Because I either was going to kill myself or I was going to keep drinking and drugging and kill myself slowly. Because it's a slow suicide is what it is for a real alcoholic. It says, we think about the accounts of our experience will help everyone to better understand the alcohol. Many do not comprehend the alcohol as a very sick person. We're not bad trying to get good. We're sick trying to get well. This is now been proven since this book has been written to be an allergy and an obsession. It's a chemical thing that they can prove now. They were way ahead of their time when they wrote this stuff. They just kind of guessed a little bit. It says that besides we assure that our way of living has its advantages for all. So that really meant something to me, like recovered. I'm going to be restored to a state of normalcy, right? I never even knew what that meant, and then this comes to the steps. It said, admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. My story clearly displays that. I don't need to go any further. If your story hasn't shown you that you can't get out of bed without taking a hit or a sip or something, you might be unmanageable. If you can't pay your bills on time, but you make $2,000 a week and your bill's only $2,000 a month, you might be one of us. If you keep getting arrested and put yourself in situations where you're getting DWIs and you keep ruining the people around you and your wife hates you and your family wants something to you, your life might seem unmanageable. I touched all of these avenues, and it talks about you don't have to have all these things happen for it to be unmanageable. Can you just not drink? It's pretty unmanageable if you just can't not drink. Like whether it's at night, whether it's after work, whether it's just in the morning, whether it's controlled. I just couldn't not pick these things up. So for 20 years, I was practicing step one. And the people that aren't in these seats right now never made it to step two. This is what somebody said to me in early recovery. This is for every person who never made it to step two. God could restore me to sanity. Bill wrote a letter to that man, Jim, who also gave me a lot of stuff about the history of AA, said that Bill wrote a letter about it. It says that sanity was the ability to see the truth. Doctor's opinion says differentiate the true from the false. They're saying the same thing. They're similes. One's a doctor's opinion, followed by the awesomeness of how they placed this book, how to be divinely intervened, that they took a doctor's opinion and then they put an alcoholic's point on the same exact thing. They just said it in different words. This book is very repetitive. It just says things in a multitude of different ways. Later on it says illusion, delusion, and self-deception. They all mean fantasy world. I live in a fantasy world. I think the world owes me something, and I think that you're going to give it to me, and if you don't give it to me, I'm going to take it. That's the world I lived in for as long as I can live in. I said this stuff had to be smashed. We were just talking about that earlier. I didn't know. This book started teaching me about alcoholism. It talks about Jim's story in here, where it talks about that he knew he was an alcoholic, but he kept going back out. He gets drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession, but we worked with him on each occasion. The guy knew he was an alcoholic. They kept working with him. Another fun fact, the next part of the story, Fred's story, I'm not you. I don't suffer from all of this, right? They said, all right, have fun, Fred. And Fred went out there and screwed his life up for another year. Talks about in this book that if people don't want it, you can't force it. You can't want the recovery more to them. So the ability to see the truth. I just invite God in. And it also just came to believe. I got sober on a maybe on this, that maybe. You seem to be happy. You seem to be getting your 60, 90, and a half year chip. Maybe something's working here. 3, made a decision. Just got to make a decision, turn over my will and my life, right? To the care of God as we understood him. Still doesn't say me. It says we. It's a group thing for me still. Well, I had to find out what will in life meant. That's my thoughts and my actions. My will is what I conjure up. Hey, I'm going to go to McDonald's. That's my will, right? It's real simple. What's my action? I get in the car and I go to McDonald's. Hey, I'm going to do these things that I like to do, and I'm going to go get these things that I like to do to feel the way I want to feel. I'm going to turn that over? That sounds real hard to me. Real difficult. He said, guess what? This is just an idea in the beginning. There's more work to be done. What is step 3? Well, it just leads you to step 4. You know, where I was going to make this searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Well, it was me, but it was really about all you when I wrote that stuff down. My mom this, and my dad that, and the boss this, that, and the other thing, and why I was angry, and why I hated you, and why I had a resentment. I didn't even know what a resentment really was, but I suffered from many of them. You know, that was pretty easy because I went to therapy for 18 years. I wanted to write this stuff down. Not everybody has that experience, but that was mine. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. The most important part of that one is another person. This book says spiritual advisor. It doesn't say sponsor. Our further books later on talks about sponsorship and what it really looks like. But that other human being was going to be someone I was going to trust within these rooms. The only reason I tell another human being is so I can't hide in the shadows anymore. I literally lived in the shadows. I already knew. God already knows. If God's all-knowing, he already knows. To tell another person was the scary part. But it was freeing. It gave me an experience that I can't describe. Have your own experience. 6, entirely to have God remove all these defects of character. Well, if you did a thorough 4 and 5 with a sponsor, you're going to find out what your defects are. That's why it's so short in this book, but we do have other literature to elaborate on it. The 12 and 12 is one of them. Many other books as well. You know, mine was anger. I told you, anger, number 1 character defect. I let it run my life just as much as I did drugs and alcohol, completely. You know, 7, humbly. That means less of me, more of you. Less of me, more of God, more importantly. To ask him to remove our shortcomings, which means I'm going to make mistakes. 6 and 7 is where I constantly live in today. You know, we were just sharing, we were in Drop the Rock, we do a little study. I come to find that I still have character defects to remind me that I'm not God. That's why I have them. Because if everything was perfect, I might start thinking I'm the one, right? I walk on water, I can change water to wine, and all that other stuff you hear about in miracles. But the miracle had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that I'm an alcoholic who doesn't drink today. That's a miracle. 8, made a list of all persons we are harmed and became willing. Well, I wasn't always willing, but I did write that stuff down. And if you do a thorough 4th and 5th with a sponsor, he'll help you with that list. I had 80-something people on there. We narrowed it down to 43 because I was a real idiot for a long time. 9, made direct amends, which means I can't scapegoat with just a phone call sometimes. When it came to the personal people, family, friends, stuff like that, I need to walk up to these people and tell them what I did. You know, except for when to possibly hurt others, right? That's what it talks about. I do not crap on your life so I can feel better. If there's an ex-girlfriend out there, or someone who's happily married, and you did some stupid stuff 20 years ago, guess what? You're not going to disrupt their life. Take your sponsor suggestion. That's what mine told me. You know, and that was freeing. If you want to experience any of these promises, because all these steps have promises, every single one. And the first step just says, I can't. The second step says, he can. Those are promises. I know that. And then the rest of them have them clearly in this book. You know, just read the book with a sponsor. You know, I had this experience of freedom as one by one. Some of them went real bad. Some of them went real good. When I was willing to face the consequences of my life. 10, 11, and 12, they call them the maintenance steps. They're really the growth steps. If you want to continue to grow in this program, you need to promptly admit when you're wrong, which happens often for me, not as often as I like to admit, but it is true. I am getting better. This is a growth thing. You know, this was not perfection. This was practice. 11, sought through prayer and meditation. I always emphasize that because guess what? It says to improve your conscious contact with your higher power. If you want to get better at this stuff, the suggestion's right there. And come to find, suggestion just means subtle command. It's one of my favorite definitions of it. I need to be tricked into doing some of this stuff because I thought it was like something I didn't have to do. But if I wanted to do it, maybe I'll do it. You know, and I've improved that I've had so many experiences in prayer and meditation, and I could sit up here for a whole 3 hours and talk about it. Once again, just try it. And if it doesn't work, just keep doing it. Like they say, keep coming. Step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps within this book with a sponsor who had an experience before me, hanging around you guys, going to meetings, doing service work, I try to carry this message, which means that a lot of us don't make it. A A lot of us don't make it. I've buried a lot of people in here, out of here, family members, friends, people I've only met once, people I got close with. And it says to practice these principles in all of our affairs, which means when I walk out into the real world that I need to be kind, courteous, compassionate, tolerant, loving, and all that other stuff they talk about. And as time has gone on, I've gotten really good at that stuff. But sometimes I got to remember that I don't do the things that I do within these rooms for me. I do it for God. I don't even do it for you. I do it for God. You know, come to find that my sponsor is not my higher power, because that guy that found me, I just went back out. I've been through 4 sponsors since then. All great breakups, by the way. We're still friendly. We still talk. That guy got sober. Come to find that I've done all this work. Now I have a relationship with this higher power. My job is to continue. It says he could and would if he sought. I seek him on a daily basis. What am I doing today? The same exact things I did when I first got here. In the last 6 years, it hasn't been easy. I've lost jobs. I've been arrested in 3 years because I let my anger get the best of me. But the thing is today that I don't repeat the same mistakes. I made the mistake and I learned from it. I had the sponsorship and the people in here when I wanted to drink it 1.5 years, when I wanted to drink it 3.5 years, to tell me that that wasn't the truth and that I was going back to the delusional state of mind. And the only thing that could fix it was showing up to these rooms, getting honest with myself and the people around me, and inviting God into my life. You know, and that girl, and this is where I'll end my story, that girl who had me in court when I first got here, who left me and never came back, and a whole bunch of shenanigan acts, you know, we were in court for about 12 months, and I kept saying, I'm sober now, right? Why aren't you coming back, and why are you doing this to me? But it talks about in this book that we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate, seemingly without provocation. That the 13 years of torment that I put this person through wasn't going to be changed overnight. That 10 to 20 years to make a skeptic out of anybody, and just because I was having some sort of spiritual shift in perception, because this is all a perspective program, that I needed to stay due diligent and ride the course, and God in good time and on God's time, not my time, would reveal what was right. Supervised visitation for 6 months. 6 months before that, stay away. Another 6 months of supervised visitation with family, and 18 months later, I got to see my daughter regularly. And then 6 years later, when I go back to New York, I stay at my ex's house with that man she married and their daughter. I have a drawer and a key to their house. That is insane. I couldn't be trusted with a book or a drink, let alone someone's key to their house. You know? My life has changed exponentially. This program has given me so much more. Some shiny stuff, sure. A couple great friends, amazing. But it does say that human power will fail us. It's given me a relationship with a higher power. It keeps me sober one day at a time. You know, if I keep doing this, I can't stay sober on yesterday's recovery. I got to keep doing it today. And it's an honor to come here and give you guys a little bit of that hope that guy gave me in the back of that church. That have your own experience, not my experience. Do the work. Go through it. You make mistakes, but learn from those mistakes. There's only 2 things that this book provides, and that's that you will find a higher power, and that you don't have to drink or drug over it and have your own experience. Thanks for letting me share.